This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
All right, welcome to Where Did the Road Go? And tonight is our second part of our follow-up on the light phenomena that we started last week, and did not get through all these stories and comments that we got from listeners. And this time, I'm joined by Joshua Cutchin.
Greetings.
And Timothy Renner.
Hello.
And we are going to kind of just delve into all of this. But first, Josh, it was mentioned by someone that you never mentioned the red hats. And I'm not sure what the red hats are. So why don't you tell me how this relates?
Well, the red caps specifically.
Red caps. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. As soon as the mic went off, Ren gave me some grief about, why didn't you mention the red caps? So the red caps are a class of fairy folk. It's probably the easiest way to put it. Predominantly seen in the Scottish lowlands, and they were distinguished by being having these sort of really nasty, wizened faces, but they were known for having their red caps, which is part of the reason that they typically had that name. Sometimes you'll hear like bloody caps or red combs or bloody combs. A lot of these different variations on this, but generally speaking, they were said to be very negative entities, and they would actually hurl giant boulders at travelers. And if they were killed, then they would actually dip their hat in the red blood. It's interesting that the whole color association with fairies. I mentioned that if there was a fairy that was seen with red on it, usually presaged death or an omen. Something Ren and I talked about was the fact that Napoleon, prior to Waterloo, actually had some run-ins with what was known as Le Nain Rouge. It's hard to sort of pin down English language sources on this, but in his memoir, he talks about encountering this little short red man, I believe in his garden. But it's interesting because sometimes in fairy lore, if you saw a fairy clad in red, it would be an ill omen, but at the same time, there are some people, especially in certain northern parts of Ireland, and some certain island communities in Ireland, that actually felt that red could be a prophylactic measure against the fairies. If you were to just pin a bit of red flannel to your jacket, it would actually keep your child from being abducted by the fairies. The idea was that either A, it reminded the fairies of fire, which obviously is something that, like any sort of mythical creature, fairies were averse to fire. But the more commonly held idea was that the red actually reminded the fairies of their non-human nature, because it reminded them of blood, and in a lot of lore, fairies didn't actually have blood. Which you could draw some parallels there to that, and the idea that gray aliens don't have any blood either. Something that you hear, part of the reason that they have that sort of gray hue. So the colors are closely associated with fairy lore in a bunch of different ways. But I suppose that we were a bit remiss not mentioning the red cap, which by all accounts is a pretty nasty customer. There are a couple of different castles throughout the British Isles that had a close association with sort of these red cap characters, as well as sort of like these malicious house spirits. I believe there was I think it was Hermitage Castle, actually has a red cap legend associated with it too. So it's a very, very common fairy motif.
All right, cool. The other one, I know you responded to this. This came from YouTube. And someone said the green glow in the woods could be the results of foxfire. This can be some fungus and microbes found in nature. In absolute dark, the tiniest amount of luminescence can seem quite bright. They said you went into a description of a ball of light. However, the writer has specified the first event as a green glow. It is useful to split events and isolate those descriptions and their phenomena.
Well, and a common alternative name for foxfire, of course, is fairy fire, because
Mm,
everything's fairies. But yeah, it's an excellent point. I hadn't really put that together. I do think that there are a handful of accounts uh, where ball lightning has appeared with a greenish glow, but the foxfire explanation is actually pretty good. I mean, it's a real phenomena that should definitely be incorporated. The only thing is that foxfire is not going to move. Is the only thing.
true,
And,
true.
and I've seen foxfire, on night hikes and so forth. And at least in the case of the lights I'm talking about, I've seen them both, and I know the difference.
Right.
The lights I saw at Site 7 were definitely not foxfire.
Right, right. And those are moving too.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other plant matter can be phosphorescent as well. I think honey mushrooms, although they're usually on the west coast, and one night I was, and this kind of reminds me of some people have talked about like the star on the ground kind of thing. I think Jeff Ritzman talked
Yeah.
about that. One night I was up at it was near Toad Road. It was at night, and I was sitting there just dark, 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 just sitting there in the dark outside. And I looked down, and it seemed like there were like these little lights all over the ground. I'm like, what the heck? And you could only really see them in total darkness. Like if a car went by or something, they completely got washed out. And they were some kind of larva. I don't even think they were firefly larvae. They were some other kind of larva that is phosphorescent, and they just they're so barely phosphorescent that unless it's complete and totally dark, you can't see them. So there are lots of things that do glow in nature besides fireflies.
And I'm looking at I think what we read as the first story last week, and she did describe a ball, not a glow.
Right.
So you did have it right, Josh, when you were talking about the ball. It says, I remember looking to the woods near our house, and there was this strange green ball of light that was near the ground, but not on the ground.
Well, and also, as someone who hasn't seen foxfire myself, since maybe you can speak to this, Tim, but I would imagine that A, it's not that strong of a luminescence, and B, that if you do see it, catch a glimpse of it, it's not going to have some sort of ball formation.
Not when I saw it, no. And yeah, it needs to be completely and totally dark to see it. Like, flashlights will wash it out, at least in my experience.
Probably easier to look at it when you're not looking at it too. Dead on, I would imagine.
Easier
to see it, rather.
Yeah, exactly. You pick it up. Yep, absolutely.
That's always a mystifying thing. You can you look up at the stars and you can see stuff out of the corner of your eye, and then you look directly at it and it's gone. Because for some reason the sides of your eyes process light differently.
That's wild. Yeah, I've always thought it was a really interesting phenomenon.
So, well, another comment on the last show was that the description of the tree that had colored lights shooting upwards, following the branches, is exactly what my adult daughter and I saw next to our house, and went on and on for a long time while we watched from the driveway last November. We went to the Ouija board to find out what it was, and all it said was spirit energy.
Wow.
So whether or not the Ouija board is accurate or not, but I mean that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's it's as accurate an answer as any until we know otherwise, right?
And this next one, this one relates to something that was talked about briefly in the Where Did the Road Go group. It might even been the same person who posted it. I don't remember now. But this comes from Adam. He says, I live near an MOD base, and I have spent some time out in the surrounding fields. One night, me and a couple of friends were heading that way to make a campfire in a small section of woods. On the way, we noticed these small tinkling lights dancing across the treetops, reds, blues, and whites. We picked up the pace, and coming up about halfway across the field, I turned to look over a hedge into the next field, and I saw a flash of light, and then found myself staring at a translucent building. I have never seen anything like this before. kind of like a ghostly building. It looked military and very bizarre. Then, after calling out to my friends and hoping they saw it too, it was gone.
Hmm.
Yeah. So someone had asked about ghostly buildings. I don't know if it was Adam, but they had asked about ghostly buildings in the Where the Road Go group, and a bunch of people had said they've had experiences like that.
I mean, yeah. Even though I haven't seen even though I haven't seen orb phenomena, like an orb of light phenomena, my time spent in the Waverly Hills Sanatorium did include some light phenomena. Always around the corner, it almost looked like that sort of blue glow that you would get from a TV that's on. And as soon as we turn the corner, that glow and whatever the source was would be gone as well. So that definitely is associated with that sort of location for sure.
I also, it's interesting that it's usually primary colors that these lights are.
It is but green is yellow and blue, right?
Well, true, true.
Um,
But like
yeah,
with
sorry.
theirs, they were red, blues, and whites.
Yes.
But I mean, you never see like silver lights or gray lights. Well, I mean, you do sometimes, but more often than not, you get red, green, blue, white. You know, very, very. Maybe primary colors is the wrong word. Very common colors, I guess. You don't see like shades of this. You don't see a light blue light generally.
Well, it's interesting to me that, like, if you look at like sort of the UFO literature, you don't see a lot of purple luminosity. I mean,
Yeah.
you do sometimes if it's on a craft, and something I spoke about in Brimstone Deceit is that there seems to be a loose correlation between seeing purple light and smelling that ozone odor, which could possibly hint to some sort of photochemical origin of the scent.
Hmm.
But you don't see a lot of purple lights in UFO literature either. No, you don't. Trying to think. I mean, obviously white, obviously blue, yellow. I feel like green is not as common in the UFO literature. I'm sure that somebody can probably provide plenty of data to argue that point on me against me. But yeah, it's interesting.
And
The Site 7 lights, when he hit them with the laser, they didn't just like automatically just flash red. They went from what other color they were usually whitish blue. They would kind of like fade in or blend into red, and then they go out. So they would like kind of. It wasn't like bam, they just turned red like a stoplight, turns red or something. They kind of faded from whatever color, and blended into red, and then they would blink out.
Hmm.
So I guess a little in between there, but mostly they were going from that whitish blue. So it's not like they had to go through the whole spectrum of colors to get to red. They just kind of faded in.
and I'll say this: if anyone else has ghostly building stories, seeing buildings where there shouldn't be buildings, or what look like phantom buildings, or seeing something and then coming back and it's gone, shoot us a message. Maybe we'll do a show on it with some stories in the future. You can either comment on like YouTube or whatever, or you can email at stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. That's something that enough people seem to have had experiences with. It might make for an interesting show.
I have a story in my follow up to Beyond the Seventh Gate. A witness with a apparently disappearing house.
Really?
Yeah. It was there one week and not the next. Now, it could have been torn down, but this was a major stone building. Seems like there would be some kind of evidence of it. Very strange.
Okay. So this one's a little bit longer. It's from Crystal, and she says, "Growing up, I've had a large handful of unexplained experiences, which sparked my curiosity. So when I woke up one night to an orb of brilliant light sitting in my basement, it sparked interest instead of spooking me. I was about 12 or 13 years old. It was summertime, and I had wanted to set up a tent in the backyard, but for whatever reason, my dad was uncomfortable with me spending the summer camping outside, so he made me set up the tent in the basement. Luckily for me, because of that, I was able to catch sight of this odd orb of light on a regular basis. Unfortunately, the only time it would appear was when I was in the tent door closed, so I could only view it through the window. It appeared about 2 to 3 feet away, baseball size, slightly tinted in color, and despite its small size, it lit up the whole room. Still, it was regular enough that by prepping the room the day before, I could try different tests to pinpoint what it might be. At first, I thought it was an outside light, so I blocked off all the windows. It still appeared as bright as before. I moved boxes around, thinking it might be a timed light inside of a junk box, but it wasn't coming from a solid, visible object. It was lit from within itself. Maybe it was a chemical reaction with something, but when I asked my parents, none of their ideas matched up with what I was seeing. I still can't rule out ball lightning or some other form of reaction since I can't go back and test it for that, even though these phenomena do not quite match up either. During your episode, there was some discussion about internal things happening, things going on with the eyes, etc. I had ideas with that as well, hallucinations or vision issues, so I brought in friends. One friend was convinced it was an angel and was enthusiastic about seeing it. She fell asleep. I woke her up when it appeared. She made a comment about the intense light, so she saw it, and irritated at the interruption, went back to sleep. My other friend was not so open to seeing it, thinking that I was trying to pull a prank on her. It was interesting that the light would not appear that night. Eventually, I was fed up with being able to view it through the tent window, so I began making attempts to examine it up close. It would not appear if I left the door open, and whenever I tried unzipping the tent door, it would shut off, just like a light bulb. Now that I'm hearing more about other people's experiences with these odd phenomena, I'm actually glad that these attempts did not pan out. The sounds of it, physical phenomena or otherwise, I would have possibly been in for an unpleasant experience. The other bit that caught my interest during your episode was a talk about the phenomena seeming to have an awareness. That always struck me about my little experiments, especially with trying to approach it. The orb seemed to interact with my physical presence. I don't have physical proof that it was aware, but there was an overwhelming feeling that it was aware of my friends and I. It was more of an awareness like you might feel around a wild animal. They might tolerate you if you stay your distance. Beyond that, it didn't seem to care about what was going on in my human existence. As an adult, I'm still curious and love to investigate these odd phenomena. I have more ideas what might be going on from an occult perspective, but since my family no longer owns the house, obviously I can't go back and try more experiments. All right, so that is basically, and that's interesting because that's consistent from the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Jeff's stories, actually. Especially the way that it sort of reacted to how it was being observed, and you'll find that size, that softball to baseball size, gets reported a lot as well.
So, and again, you have that interaction. It's responding to what she's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And only showing itself almost like theater, only showing itself at certain times.
Maybe we're missing the obvious, that there was a tent there. And how many people report unzipping the tent? I'm joking here. And the Sasquatch is not there when they unzip. The tent is the common factor.
I see. All right. So all this phenomena revolves around tents.
No, that's a really, really interesting story. I guess I would, since her family doesn't own the house anymore, maybe if she could, in some way, gently ask the current residents if they've ever seen anything in the basement. But I know that's not always possible or easy to do.
Yeah, because you never know how they're going to respond to that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very fascinating. That's a really interesting one.
Now, was it Mike Hughes that had talked about seeing lights in his basement when he was a kid, or was it his hallway?
It sounds like something Mike would have said. I know that Mike had some light phenomena in his youth, so
yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember. But it was a while ago that he told me the story and told us the story, so I'm not remembering quite clearly what it was. All right, let's move on to the next one. That was a really interesting story because it was sort of testable, and you don't always get that. From Pippa, have had these flashes of bright light in the middle of London in the UK, lived in an active cottage with an elderly female that would take form and was seen by a few different people that lived there. The bright flashes of light only happened during the day and were so bright they would be stronger than the sunlight outside. We also had dark spells where the sunlight would blink out for a moment as if something huge passed between us and the sun. It only happened inside the house, never outside, and was always near a sunny window. Now, I haven't heard of the dark spells before.
Not
Well,
inside.
that's a new one, yeah.
So, did you say not inside, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, people have described, the sky darkening in the same way that you get the everything going quiet in the woods sometimes.
Really?
You get that. Yeah, oh, it's rare, but yeah, I've here and there you'll get that, but inside darkening, like, when it's daylight out, when they're not, I've heard of lights going out and stuff, but when they're talking about bright sunlight coming through the window and then it just darkens, that would be creepy, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, even the flashes being brighter than the sunlight outside would be a little creepy.
Yeah, yeah. And they're associating this with a haunting. I'm guessing.
It sounds like that. I mean, they said they were they lived in an active cottage with an elderly female, but maybe one of them was actually generating it, or a combination of them was somehow creating some spontaneous PK that was kicking in here and there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my best guess, anyway.
Yeah, but it just goes right back to these lights just popping up all around all the different phenomena, like across the board. It's the one thing that connects all this stuff.
Yeah, I really feel like when I feel like the light phenomena is one of those linchpins that if we can just wrap our heads around that, it's so connected to other stuff. I think that there might be something objectively observable, something that really does sort of tie a lot of this paranormal stuff together. That if we could just observe it, just wrap our heads around the light phenomena aspect.
Yeah. Well, and I know, Tim, you've mentioned that at some point you face that we're not going to solve these issues, but with something like this, it's a potentially big key to figuring a little bit more about it.
It is. I'm not saying don't try. I think we should try to solve these issues.
And the thing is, I think we won't necessarily solve them because we don't even know the breadth of them yet.
Yeah, and they're so slippery. That's the thing. Like they're 2-3 steps ahead of us, it seems.
We don't quite understand perception. We don't understand reality. We don't understand life and death. So understanding the paranormal is kind of like guesswork. But, whatever data we can actually put together and make connections with is a step forwards. Duncan says, I've seen flashes of light, but nothing as grand as the experiences described. The weirdest one happened in Scandinavia when I was going to a friend's house. It was late, probably 10 p.m. on a work night. He lived in an apartment high-rise with a woodland situated behind him. As I walked up close to the apartments, I see a bright flash come from what I believe is the edge of the woods. It could very well have been a person with a camera, but at this time of day, and why take a picture of me, a nobody going to another nobody? Sasquatch?
Therefore Sasquatch. No, I mean, no. Again, it sounds very consistent with a lot of Jeff stuff.
Yeah.
The flashbulb phenomena. I'm always a little bit, to put on my skeptical hat, I'm always a little bit skeptical that perhaps whenever that sort of thing is seen outside, that it might be something like heat lightning or something.
True. And we don't know the weather at the time, so that's also a possibility. But heat lightning doesn't, I mean, I don't know. I've seen a lot of heat lightning, and it never confuses me into thinking it's a camera flash.
Well, again, I'm putting on the skeptical hat, which means that I'm going to find something that kind of fits, but any sane person would actually recognize as being something completely different. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is Siddelicious. Two of us lying outside our remote cabin, not cavern,
Remote cabin.
in North California, stargazing, witnessed the side of our cabin slowly light up and then slowly go back to pitch darkness. We know it couldn't have been car lights because a car did go by across the river and the headlights streaked all over the mountainside, whereas the cabin lighting phenomena was illuminating the outside of the cabin. We were so flabbergasted that we didn't get up and go over to see where the source might have been coming from. The flat we lived on had long been known for spirit lights by the local Native Americans.
So the cabins were the star of an interdimensional show, and they were being spotlighted. Right. It was,
Hmm.
if only your eyes could see interdimensionally, you would have got a wonderful performance. No, I mean that reminds me of the glowing fields that people were that I was talking about last time, where they just said like the fields were just lit up,
Yeah.
like without a source, what like why and how,
There was actually a recent Sasquatch Chronicles episode where somebody reported this during the same, quite frankly, pixie-led excursion. They felt that they not only had seen a Sasquatch, but also saw a field that they said looked like it was lit up with like that to be a movie set. Um,
Hmm.
and but they couldn't discern a light source, which I believe is exactly what you've described too, right, Tim?
Oh yeah, that would describe the what I saw one night. Yeah, that's the one where the fellow I was driving with was kind of in a daze. I pointed to him like I was all excited, and he was just it's like it didn't register with him. It's very very strange.
Yeah, that's queer.
Hmm. Okay. The next one was Tino. Here in the north of England, we have the Pennines Hill Range, where these UFO Earth lights are seen very often and strangely after midnight and in the small hours. I am close to a town called Tormorden, which is a UFO hotspot and was the location for a famous case involving policeman Alan Godfrey in 1980. The moors above the town have anomalous light activity, which I saw myself 2 years ago. This happens all over the British Isles and worldwide. Um, and yeah, it seems like whatchamacallit, who's the one who started writing about earthquake lights and light phenomena? Devereaux. Paul Devereaux wrote quite a bit about this stuff.
Yeah, Haunted Land, I believe, was one of them,
Possibly, I don't
or
remember
maybe it
that
was a
title.
different one. Maybe it was a different one. He's done some great stuff. Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, this is tied into this idea of portal areas and genus loci, and the idea that oh, that's an area with a lot of UFO activity. It's an area with a lot of Bigfoot activity. There's something. I mean, I would be curious to see um, if there's some sort of ley line correlation uh, to where these sightings are taking place. I'm sure. I mean, I feel like you stumble over ley lines all the time in the British Isles, but I feel like ley lines are one of those things that got a lot of attention at one point in Fortiana and was a really promising area of research that I feel like people talk about casually, but they don't really engage with as much anymore.
Yeah, I think it kind of got taken over by sort of the whole New Age thing, and that's why.
Well, at one point there was this entire entirely sort of scientifically minded ufological study method called orthoteny. You can find it back in some old flying saucer review issues where they were actually trying to correlate UFO sightings to geomagnetic anomalies and ley lines and that sort of phenomena. But that fell very much out of favor. I haven't really dug into it. I've just run it across in passing in my research. But, I wonder if part of me thinks that that might be a really rich vein to tap into. Because I feel like people, again, like you said, it's sort of been co opted by the New Age community. But I think that the concept itself still has legs, and I think that I would not be surprised, let me put it that way, if a lot of this light phenomena corresponds to those sort of locations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, like the people who just had the light in the cabin said the Native Americans considered what do they say, spirit lights in that
Yes.
area. So,
Yeah.
um, and the
I've
thing
been
about
uh,
go ahead.
I've been attempting to map the ley lines in York County actually.
Really?
So yeah, I have a map. I'm laying down and doing it by a dowsing rods for the most part, and then trying to get other people to help, and so it's not just all Tim's intuition, but
Mm, right.
you
Some
know,
kind of verification.
yeah,
Tib tuition, yeah.
So I'm very, very interested in ley lines. And for instance, I believe I have identified one that's almost a perfect north-south line that runs through Cador's Furnace, which is the Toad Road area I'm always talking about, straight down to where my old chessboard was. It's almost a perfect north-south straight line. So I'm finding some very, very interesting things. There's another line I'm not 100% sure of. The north-south one I talked about, I'm almost positive that's a like more of a highway. I guess I think of them more as highways, and then like with the sort of side roads and back roads going off of them. There's another one I've identified that runs from the furnace through Site 7 and up to another area that we've just got a bunch of reports from recently. So I'm very, very interested in the idea of ley lines, and I'm hoping I can get people to help me identify more of them, because very little work's been done in the United States with ley lines, at least that I can find.
Why don't I live closer to you, Tim? Damn it.
And the thing about Devereaux's work too is that he showed how they, UFO sightings follow fault lines. The majority of UFO sightings across the UK, at least, followed fault lines. And what struck me about Strieber's encounters is, he's in upstate New York where there's not a lot of fault lines. There's like one big fault line that runs through New York State down across like the Long Island Sound, and it's not. I don't think it's anywhere near where Strieber was, but there was a report that came out a few years ago saying that New York is actually catacombed with, or like just completely covered in fault lines. They're not major fault lines, but they're there and they're all over the place. And I think it was one of those things where they felt it was kind of unusual. And I'm thinking, okay, well, there's the fault lines.
Yep. It's it's interesting that something that Gordon White has talked about extensively, but that sort of like Hudson Valley burned over district situation is like a long spiritualist tradition with the Fox sisters, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, and it's just sort of been like a spooky sort of area, and of course that's where Whitley Strieber has his first revelation, is in that sort of general area.
Yeah, well, you have the Fox sisters, you have the birth of Mormonism, you have the Seth material, and probably half a dozen other things I'm forgetting about at the moment. So yeah, it's kind of a rich paranormal area. Okay, so let's move on to Greg's experience. And he says, the only way I know how to describe what I saw is liquid light. It was in the upper corner of a bedroom that was already well lit, and it was so bright. It looked like water does in zero gravity, like what you would see on the space station. The mass was undulating like water, and it was dripping to the floor. It was the brightest white light I've ever seen. I walked around the bed. It was my first time in this house, and I had to take my eyes off of it to maneuver around the room. When I had approached the corner, it was gone. I looked on the floor, and there was nothing there. It says, the girl walks into her bedroom and sees this puzzling, bewildered look on my face. She asked me what happened, and I explained it to her. Apparently, such occurrences were not uncommon, as she just kind of laughed it off. I eventually moved into this house, and I had another intense experience, but it was not so pleasant. Actually, it was the most terrifying moment of my life, but I digress. If anyone else has experienced anything like this, please let me know. The closest I've ever experienced to that is I got that same sort of thing, but with darkness, and it wasn't dripping, but it looked like liquid darkness moving across my ceiling.
Not when not on hallucinogens.
Yes, I've never done hallucinogens.
No, I mean I've seen liquid light on hallucinogens.
Oh,
but well, I think it's very attributable to the chemical. So
this was a line of at least a metaphoric line that Jung pursued a lot with his study of the flying saucer, was this idea that it was sort of by definition, it was mercurial, and it sort of exhibited those sort of aspects, the sort of quicksilvery, dripping, dropping aspects. And I believe that his book on flying saucers actually talked about an account. It was either a dream or a eyewitness account, and I realized that those are two very different things. But where the flying saucer actually appeared to sort of like melt and drip and actually appeared to have some sort of like drop-like watery quality. And of course, I mean, I think that I mean, it's something else that Terrence McKenna described when he was describing UFO phenomena. He said, it's whenever you try to reach out and grasp it, for lack of a better term, he always seems to be very, very mercurial. It's almost like it sort of slips through your fingers like water as well. So, from at least a metaphoric standpoint, that's consistent. It also is, sort of reminiscent of these accounts where you see craft that appear to be sort of sloughing off some sort of slag or some sort of deposit. This idea of this liquid molten component. I realize that what this person saw was not a UFO, but I'm just sort of thinking about the fact that UFOs generally often tend to be anomalous lights and sort of exhibit this sort of mercurial aspect as well.
Fair enough.
So did this person write about the other terrifying
No.
experience? Or,
Nope,
no,
that was it.
Ah,
But they're welcome
Such
to
a
share it with
tease.
us if they want.
Yeah, please share. Don't be a tease.
All right, from Nicole. She says she was in Ohio and her life has been outlined by orbs for the past 7 years, all different colors from red to yellows, very vibrant, sizes from ping pong balls to beach balls. I have approximately 200 photos of these guys. They follow me everywhere. The photos have been verified as legit per an experienced paranormal research team and authors on the strange. They were making arrangements to come out for an investigation, but the head guy passed away. The orbs can be photographed anytime, day or night. They also seem to be intelligent. I have the ability to call them in and have them position themselves for photos. They are not all orbs. Some are splotches of light, some are rods, some are orbs with designs within them. She's had an intense near-death experience, gone for 4.5 minutes. Doesn't know if it's actually connected to the orb phenomena or not. I would say that most people who have near-death experiences tend to show some sign of PK afterwards, and so on and so forth. So she might be creating these things around her without being conscious of it.
100%.
They could be electrical in nature.
So she sees them without the use of the camera as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's my thing. Whenever I have grown quite jaded at orbs on photography. I mean, I think
Yes. Yeah.
that the lion's share of those tend to be, earnest misidentifications of dust or things like that. But yeah, if she's actually seeing them with the naked eye, that's a horse of a different color.
And of course, I don't know what experts she had looking at them. So, but the minute she said she had an intense near-death experience, it's kind of like, oh, well, now it seems a little more feasible in a sense,
No, absolutely, 100%. I mean, that's just speaking of horses, that's the horse that we've beaten a great deal. How both abductees and NDE survivors and people who return from fairyland, gotta throw my hat in the ring for that. Often experience psi effects and poltergeist phenomena, and basically the person returns haunted in a way.
Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it. All right, so let's see. The next one's short. I see a bright white flash that blocks out everything that comes from, and it comes from above my head on the left side, and only from the left side. And it's real because my dog sees it as well.
Huh.
So I initially, from it's only coming from one side, it would make me think that maybe they're saying in his visual cortex. But if he can, if his dog really is noticing it, then it's clearly not just in his visual cortex.
Yeah, I mean, I was gearing up to say before the dog, I was gearing up to say, yeah, that could be something, visually happen or even
neurological, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but then when he says the dog sees it, well, that changes things.
So I'm not sure how he knows the dog sees it, but I would assume the dog reacts to it in some way.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so. Oh, this is the demon one. I saved this one for you, Tim.
Yay.
Because this is typical of our demon comments. Demons are very accommodating. If you expect to see something, they will show up. They can manifest in any form or you want. There is reason you often feel fear. That is a natural reaction to evil. They are after your eternal soul. You believe in the supernatural things, entities. Why not believe in a supernatural God who loves you and his son he gave you his son to save you? At least investigate the truth of Jesus and give yourself a fighting chance. I am not a religious person. I have a relationship with the creator of the universe. God bless you in your journey to truth.
All right.
I know how you love these type of comments, Tim, so I saved that
Well,
one for you.
I told you my new approach now is just yes, because I'm that fight is over for me. Yes, demons, yes.
It's a very easy catch-all.
It is.
Well, I'm personally very sympathetic to it. I mean, I can understand how somebody could look at this data objectively and reach that conclusion.
Sort of, but you have to have that mindset to begin with.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I think what a lot of people, I say this as a Christian, trapped in the reductive good, evil, Judeo-Christian sort of shtick, they end up faced with this idea of there being some sort of force that doesn't seem positive, that appears to be interacting on the spirit realm, and they say, well, it's either an angel, but if it's not an angel, it must be a demon. But I'm much more keen to embrace ideas of free agents out there, and sort of a Gordon Whitean spirit ecosystem model.
Yeah. And not only that, go ahead.
I'm just cautious of painting anything, with the paintbrush, whether it's the demon paintbrush or the interdimensional paintbrush, or what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime like someone defines it, like as if they know 100%, like they're sure this is what it is. That's what I react to, really. I've had people on Strange Familiars that had what seemed like very, very negative and what I would call demonic kind of things. Like that's the label I would put on it. I'm not saying it was a demon. I'm just saying it acted demonic. It seemed to respond to the one I'm thinking of in particular had a lot to this person's addiction was kind of woven into this series of sort of poltergeisty haunting kind of stories. So that very much seems to have like a sort of demonic element. There's this very negative kind of life affecting thing where it's woven into this pattern of addiction and so forth. So, I'm not completely dismissive of it, but what I am dismissive of is when you say, immediately, like everything's a demon. Like that's everything out there is a demon. If it's supernatural and vaguely scary, then it must be a demon. When we don't, none of us know.
Well, we all know it's all fairies. I mean, honestly.
There you go.
And it says and it says that fear is a natural reaction to evil, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. Because something that's evil, I would think, could also be very seductive. I think fear is a reaction to things we don't understand.
Yes, yeah. Aren't there? I'm drawing a blank, but someone more knowledgeable of the Bible than me, I'm sure that there are instances of people being, fear of God is a thing, right?
Sure.
Oh yeah, but it's a common theme to theophany in general. I mean, benevolent deities throughout a variety of world religions often inspire fear. I mean, it was in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna actually witnesses Krishna's true form and says that his mind is not at all at peace having to perceive this. So that's when Krishna assumes his avatar form. But all throughout the Bible, there's this idea that literally to look upon God was to mean death for people, especially for the unrighteous.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot the thing I was just going to say, though, about fear. Yep, I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember what it was. Apparently the demon left.
Or the demon of forgetfulness is here.
Ooh, I think I got lots of those. Yeah, there was something. The reason you feel fear. Oh, the reason you feel fear can also be if we're dealing with something that is environmental. Strong, types of energies might be causing, earth energies can give a sense of fear. Elf waves, for instance, not like fairies, but like extra
Yeah.
low frequency waves
ELF, yes, yes, yes.
can totally give you that feeling of fear.
Yeah, and there's the flesh and blood Sasquatch people say that they employ infrasound, which may in fact be the case. I mean,
Yeah.
and that would have the ability to cause fear, absolutely, panic, fear.
And aren't there some animals that can do it as well? Don't like lions or tigers or something have
Tigers, yeah, tigers
tigers?
specifically,
I
yeah.
Yeah, I think a lion's roar. Yeah, I think they've had shown it, and elephants, and I'm
I
trying to
do not,
think.
I do not believe it has been exhibited in primates. Doesn't mean it couldn't be, but to my knowledge, there has not been a primate that's exhibited use of infrasound.
Hmm. Yeah, but at least we know it's something that can exist in the animal kingdom.
Right, right.
So it gets points there.
Yes, yeah.
But environmentally, if you're seeing a ball of light and you're approaching it, that ball of light is being created by some combination of environmental factors that also affects you on a visceral level when you get close to it, you might feel fear. You might be like, "Whoa, okay, what's this?" You don't know what it is, and you're getting this visceral fear reaction. Um, it doesn't sound like a lot of the people having these experiences, though, are reporting fear. Like the woman who had the thing in her basement, she wasn't afraid of it. She was just trying to interact with it.
Yeah, yeah. That sounded like wonderment, and what a wonderful encounter. If you're gonna have a encounter with the paranormal, that's the one you want, right?
Yeah, and when you saw the Site 7 lights, there was no sense of fear from them, was there?
No, now I don't know if I'd have been there alone. I don't know.
Well, that's
uh,
also because you don't want to just disappear.
yeah, yeah. But no, not at all. It was just wonder and amazement.
So, and we all see the world through our own sort of perspective that we've been given as we experience life. I mean, no one's perspectives are exactly the same. So that's another obstacle in sort of untangling all this stuff is like trying to take these assumptions and these perspectives and make them as neutral as possible. So, actually, this story, I should have read it earlier because the other one was responding to this. I thought it was one we read. It says about 4 months ago, this is from Pammy. I saw different colored lights racing up the tree branches next to the side of my house. I ran into the house to get my adult daughter to see it too, thinking it would be gone by the time we got back out there, but it was still there and we watched it for a long time in wonder. This is rural North Georgia in the mountains with no close neighbors, and I still wonder what it was. So that the one of the early stories we read tonight was actually a response to that one, and I thought it was something we read.
Mm.
So
Well, they're
again,
describing similar things.
yeah, because it was the other person saying I also saw lights racing up the tree branches. Um, so yeah, I don't know what to make of that. That's really odd. I mean, other than
Oh,
fairies.
well, North Georgia is a pretty. It's got its own share of strange stuff. Pretty squatchy part of the country, to be honest. So
Really?
there's that too. Yeah, yeah. The well, this might be a subject for a different time, but the Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, is astoundingly good.
Hmm.
Um, I thought it was going to be a roadside attraction. It actually has a lot of like original, important documents and casts. And anyway, that's sort of a side tangent. But it's I find I find it a little bit more compelling whenever a story takes place in the mountains or in mountainous areas. I think there's something about that sort of space geographically where where you run into a lot more of this sort of phenomena versus flatlands or even coastlines. I feel like there's something sort of spooky about mountains in general, and I don't really know what it is. But obviously, that North Georgia is definitely sort of getting into that Appalachian Range territory.
Okay, all right. I don't know if I believe in mountains though.
Because it's a flat Earth, right?
Oh, I don't know. I was just going with that, you know. All right. So I think this is the last one for the lights. I've had two experiences. This comes from John, of intelligent lights observed from the same rural vantage point and approximately 1 kilometer away in opposite directions at both times. To keep it brief, both were observed by multiple witnesses, the first time communicating with the light by flashing a torch. The light would blink out and then reappear somewhere else in the night sky. Got to the point where I could shine the torch on an area of the sky and the light would appear in that space as soon as the torch was turned off. On this occasion, the light would have been right over a known fault line. Hey, there we go. Definite sense of intelligent communication and mischievous playfulness. The second time, no torch was used, but the lights began to multiply, and I kid you not, 2 helicopter-type lights seemed to materialize and began circling and tracking the blinking lights. Strangely, the next morning and ever since, nobody who witnessed these events has ever discussed them with each other, like there was some kind of dreamlike or amnesia effect or mental block connected to the displays.
Well, the lack of communication is really common amongst witnesses in a lot of ways, in a lot of different accounts that I've run across, at least. People will come back for an experience and drive back 4 hours after experiencing something weird and sit in complete silence. So I think that's, I don't know if that necessarily points to some sort of government cover-up. What I was wondering with the sort of fault line aspect is that a lot of times people say, oh, there's a fault line. I'm guilty of this. I think I said in the last episode. There's a fault line, so these must be Earth lights. But part of me wonders if the fact that there's a fault there doesn't mean that the lights are associated with the fault, but there's something about that sort of area that allows something to bleed through into our reality.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's definitely a natural phenomenon, but it could be something that something is using that natural energy to manifest.
Right, and I think the correlation between lights and fault lines is too strong to really fully ignore.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. What's interesting here is the beginning of this, where he's talking about shining the torch or the flashlight at these things. It's almost exactly what John Keel talks about in the Mothman prophecies.
Oh, I hadn't put that together, but a good point.
Yeah, and that's actually in the movie. They have a deleted scene for that, if I remember right. So if you got like the second edition of the DVD, there was I think it's the only deleted scene, and it's them shining lights up at these UFOs in the sky and getting a response from them.
Also, just again, since I'm on a little tangent here, that movie has aged really well, I feel like.
Well, it was, I think they intentionally took the UFO stuff out because I think they didn't want it to be too confusing for people, which is fine. I understand that. But taking that stuff out actually makes it creepier than if they had left the UFO stuff in there.
Well, yeah, because inevitably people would have been like, "Oh, it must be aliens."
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that film, because part of the reason I sort of wanted to go on this little bit of a tangent is because the latest Rin Soup mentions it, and I've come to know the screenwriter of the Mothman prophecies, and
Really?
yeah, he's a really cool cat. He would be a great guest to have on the show. I know he's been on a couple different podcasts before, but he knows his stuff. Like, he's very, very well read guy on this stuff.
Oh, well, you can tell from the movie.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, because I remember when I saw it, actually before I was really into Fortiana and stuff, I was like, it's okay, whatever. But it captures the feeling,
Yes,
of this sort of thing. It's sort of like the nonsensical non sequiturs, things that you barely catch a glimpse of, things that you never, I think there's one moment where, it captures that great John Keel thing of checking in somewhere and him already having been there, according to the owners of the hotel and stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it does a really good job in that respect. So hats off. I think it's aged extremely well.
I would agree. And a lot of people didn't like it at first, and I think it's because it was so weird, and there weren't any. It's kind of like it tells the story without giving you a completion at the end where they explain everything.
I mean, yeah. There's not there's no closure, which again is super consistent with a lot of this stuff too.
Exactly. Um, yeah, I absolutely love that movie, and I was, because initially it's like I started seeing some of the reviews. I wanted to go see it as soon as it came out. Some of the reviews were like, and the clip they used in the trailer with the whole chapstick thing, like in the context of the movie, that's a meaningful scene, but in a trailer with no context, it just seems silly.
Right.
It's like, oh, look, the guy on the phone knows he's holding chapstick. So what? But when you realize that he didn't even know what he was holding, he was testing how this person could, injured cold could possibly know. He just reaches into the thing and grabs something, and he's like, chapstick, and he's like, oh man, how does he know? But in that short little 2-second clip, it's like, well, that was stupid.
Yeah, exactly. It seems inconsequential, but again, capturing the real spirit of this stuff. Most of the paranormal is completely inconsequential.
Yes.
You don't get these big revelatory experiences that often.
So one of the things that we talked about last time that I wanted to get into, and I was hoping we could have Ren here for this, since it was he that kind of brought it up.
With his science knowledge.
Blue Adept on Twitter had linked us to this article that says scientists have successfully inserted false sensations into the brain. Could they one day edit your memories? And it says controlling neurons with holographic projections could be revelatory for how we control prosthetic limbs. And this comes from, what is the ALPHR? There's no
Alpha,
title.
I guess. Yeah.
There's no title at the top of the page. That's interesting. But anyway, the science behind this. Oh, it looks like there's a cookie thing there. Yeah, alpha. That is exactly what it is. Okay. So they're talking about using a holographic brain modulator, and it's supposed to activate or suppress certain neurons, and the aim is to be able to do this reactively to modify the brain's activity and insert false sensations. And one of the things they're going to be using is light. They would be focusing light to hit certain neurons in the brain. And the team used computer-generated holography. Holography? That is so not how you say that.
Holography.
Thank you. This allowed them to create a 3D hologram of light points, which was projected through a layer of tissue at the surface of the mice's somatosensory cortex in the brain. The major advance is the ability to control neurons precisely in space and time, said co-author Nicholas Bigard. In other words, to shoot the very specific sets of neurons you want to activate and to do it at the characteristic scale and the speed at which they normally work. The prototype was tested in the touch, vision, and motor areas of the mice on treadmills. The researchers didn't notice any behavioral changes, but the brain activity was similar to what would be expected if the mice were responding to actual stimuli. So, taking Ren's idea that there could be something out there that is able to stimulate parts of our brain using light, and taking all of this type of phenomena where light is a common thing, also taking, like we said, like most encounters involve light. You have encounters of lights of revelation, the story in the Bible where, is it Paul? Like it gets hit by a light.
His road to Damascus experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So remind me, because I don't entirely remember. Just because I was tired. Did we talk about the fact that DMT has an effect? Light has an effect on the pineal gland, which
I don't think so.
Okay, so I mean, like, that's part of the reason that so it was recently illustrated that there are quantities of DMT in the pineal gland, I believe, which has long been said to be where DMT a lot of it or some of our endogenous DMT comes from, and is also regarded as the seat of the soul or the third eye. And the reason it's called the third eye is because, well, number one, if you actually look at it, it sort of looks like, that sort of Eye of Horus imagery, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, the cross section of how a pineal gland looks like the Eye of Horus. But also, evolutionarily speaking, it is an actual its lineage in your body in terms of the human body is actually had an ocular function, and because of that, the pineal gland is affected by bursts of light.
Hmm.
So that sort of has caused me to wonder sometimes, if light can't be a mechanism for inducing some of these altered states that might actually allow you to commune with the other. Um, it's something that I mean, supposedly there are people who can. There's some guy out on the internet flogging this device that actually like strobes in your face and is allegedly able to help you release endogenous DMT.
Hmm.
Um,
Is it like a
but
dream machine?
it might be. It might be. Can't remember who I
So,
talked to who had where I'd heard that they'd used it, but yeah, supposedly.
so, it William Gibson who came up with the dream machine. I'm trying to think. I know it from the band Psychic TV and their little cult organization they had in the 80s called the Temple of Psychic Youth. They would send you free plans to make your own dream machine, and what it was a you hooked it up to a phonograph. It was a tube with specifically cut holes in it. To make kind of random flashes. So you'd lower a light bulb on a wire into the center of the tube, and you actually looked at it with closed eyes. So you used a light that was bright, like a 90 watt or 120 watt, I forget, light bulb. And as this tube that was attached to the turntable spins, it would create these random flashes of light.
Hmm.
And you could sit there with your basically you're looking at it with your eyes closed and you will go into a trance state. It absolutely works. It's amazing. You can do a similar thing if there's a long stretch of highway and sun's shining through trees.
Mm-hmm.
You can close your eyes and look at the sun, and a similar thing will happen if it's a long enough. It needs to be a long enough to get you into a trance state. Um, so a fairly long stretch of highway. Obviously, someone else is driving. You're not driving. But I've used a dream machine before. I made one in the past. I'd actually very much like to make one again if I could find the plans. I'm sure I have them somewhere. I'm sure they're online. But this very much reminds me of that. It's these random flashes of light, and absolutely can make you go into a trance state.
Well, and all of this probably owes a debt to the Lovecraft short story From Beyond, where there was
Mm-hmm.
actually a device that created this sort of resonance wave that activated the pineal gland as a means of perceiving alternate perception. So part of me wonders if, sort of one of those the medium is the message things, if perhaps this light phenomena doesn't simply exist to facilitate that sort of connectivity. I know we're sort of straying a bit
No, that's fine. That's fine.
far from the original topic, but I wonder if there isn't something about just light in general that has a really strong effect on our mental state in general. It would be. I mean, it would make a lot of sense with how prevalent light phenomena seems to rear its head in the paranormal.
Yeah.
It was Brian Geisen who invented the dream machine. Sorry.
I wouldn't have known otherwise. So
Yeah.
neat. Yeah.
Yes. Sort of contemporary and associate of William Burroughs.
Huh. The other thing, you mentioned the driving down the road, but there have been, I'm sure, plenty of people out here there who have had the experience of basically going into a trance while they're driving, especially from repetitive type of things like driving down long highways where you just don't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the brain can be entranced fairly easily. Also, look at the number of UFO sightings that start with flashing lights.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing this sort of plays right into not only what Ren was speaking about, but Josh last week talked about this idea of sort of the reskinning of the paranormal in the terms of video games. And if something was able to control lights in this manner, I mean, obviously it's a thing because they're already talking about doing it. They're having some success with doing it with mice and so forth. So if someone or something is far advanced of us, they could literally make us see a Bigfoot if they wanted to, or in turn a gray alien, or whatever.
Or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Sarah.
oh, I was going to say, or present the archetype, or just not really the archetype, but like a mat that we can then paint with what we think is there.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, the idea of the it, or the Harry Potter boggart, that that here's a template. What will influence you the most? That's what you end up seeing.
Yeah. Or what scares you the most, or what
Right.
you expect. Because definitely some of these things are expectation, especially when you start getting like I look at the really weird cryptids when you have sudden like groupings of weird cryptids suddenly being reported. Um, Not just the one-off thing, but like one person sees it and then simultaneously a few other people see it. It seems like it, it's clearly not something like a Bigfoot that could possibly be explained by nature.
Well, like a lot, I've always found it hilarious that a lot of these Dogman encounters feature like Bowflex body, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilder sort of pecs and abs,
Yeah,
which never mind the idea of an upright canid having zero genuine basis in the fossil record, but also this idea that it's not only that, it's also not only is he going to eat you, but he also lifts, bro. So it's an existential threat, and it's also like a threat to your masculinity. Look at this buff dog man, which
yeah. Dogman is there's so much going on there beyond a natural creature that I mean that's a whole other show, I think.
yeah. We've never done a show on Dogman.
And but there are people who, just like Sasquatch, insist that there's a race of upright canines that it's running around North America.
See, I find that way harder to believe than a primate. Honestly,
Yeah. A canid is a pretty efficient uh, evolutionary animal. I mean,
yeah.
they're pretty efficient at what they do. I guess it could be improved on by opposable thumbs, but but there's so much other stuff. I mean, there's this weird stories about people say when they'll go from all fours to standing up, but they'll make these like popping noises when they do. To me,
Hmm.
that's like something's like, okay, that's weird, right? Like there's something more there. And they're attributing it to like their bones or whatever popping into place, or sinews or whatever. But I'm thinking like, well, now we have a popping noise like that, uh, when other things when reports of Bigfoot going from all fours to standing up, you don't get the popping noise necessarily, but natural creatures, you don't have that. A bear stands up, you don't have a sort of a popping noise. If it's something that it naturally can do, it just seems odd. But and then the people report this intense fear, but these creatures, these dogman creatures will get right in their face, but I don't think I've heard one actual attack, at least not that I can recall.
Well, and the other thing that sort of makes me skeptical of dogmen being an actual creature is you don't see anything with that sort of dog leg. You don't see anything that is capable of walking bipedally, having that dog leg structure. You just don't see that.
Yeah.
Bears don't have that. That sort of double jointed sort of scenario. So, I mean, the idea that if there is some sort of physical basis to something like Dogman, that it would evolve that leg to walk upright, sort of, it doesn't hold water for me personally.
The canine head on an upright body, I think I heard someone, like a zoologist or some real kind of person who had education in the matter, said like that makes no sense. Like a canine head on the way the neck of the canine is, and putting it on upright biologically, it just doesn't make sense.
Right, unless you're dealing with something like an archetypal entity, a Hermanubis, an Anubis,
Right.
a dog-headed saint, of which there are plenty.
Yes.
That's sort of, I think that's well, and also like the thing that's almost universal, the dogman thing that you don't run into with the Bigfoot stories, are witnesses feeling this just complete existential terror, this real sense of dread that you get in some Bigfoot reports, but not nearly as consistent as you do in dogman reports.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
close.
almost across the board with dogs.
yeah,
It's closer to the black-eyed kids phenomena.
right, yeah.
Yeah. It's very it's interesting. I mean, I think there's definitely something going on there, but I really cannot get on board that it's a natural creature.
No. I did have one other comment here, and this was on an older show we did, but the story is really interesting. He said that Aaron says that he lives down in Australia, and in a local forest, he had pulled the car over, and suddenly everything went still, and he was looking down into a valley and saw a cloaked being that he could see the outline of, and it stood around 12 feet tall, walking down the valley. And as soon as he says, as soon as it sensed me, it stood behind a tree and did not move. Scared the hell out of him. He jumped in the car and got out of there.
I'd have to clean out my pants. I mean, like, that's horrifying. Like, yeah.
I don't know. I'd kind of like to see a 12-foot being.
Well, yeah, said the guy who's seen the devil demon monkey.
I didn't like seeing the devil demon monkey.
Seriah's like, I'm free next Thursday. How would I see a 12-foot monkey?
From a safe enough distance, I'd like to view, pretty much anything.
Yeah, it was down in a valley. It's fine. I mean, it's 12 feet tall. It could probably run pretty quick.
Yeah, I wonder if he said it meant, when he said everything got still, if he was referring to the Oz effect. I don't know.
That's what it sounds like.
That's
Yeah.
what it sounds like, yeah.
That eerie quiet of the Oz effect. That, yeah, definitely. It's, and I've experienced that in the woods, and that's never a fun thing when you're by yourself in the woods.
No, it's not.
Because it's so. I mean, it's like it's hard to tell if it's just ominous because everything just got quiet, or if there's something else giving it that ominous feel.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who hikes alone and who has experienced that, I now kind of sort of rely on birds and squirrels and natural sounds to sort of calm me when I'm alone. As long as I'm hearing something there, I'm like, oh, everything's cool. I hear birds, I'm good, And then, but when I don't, that's when I start like, all right, what's going on?
Yeah, you're almost like in a bubble.
Yeah. And I have to say, I don't think I think when I've thought I've experienced it since that time, I haven't really. It was just a lull, But the one time I absolutely did experience it was enough.
Yeah, it's pretty distinctive.
Yeah.
Because it's absolute quiet.
Yeah, it's like the sound just gets sucked out.
So, all right. So I think that covers most of what we wanted to talk about in this second part here. I mean, people are still free to send us light experiences if they want. If we get enough of them, we might do a follow-up. But like I said, I'm kind of interested in people's experiences with the phantom buildings. So if people have experiences with that, buildings disappearing or looking like they're phantasmical, like the story we read earlier, drop me a line. Stories at where'dtheroadgo.com. Maybe we'll do a show of a collection of those type of stories at some point. And you said someone on Strange Familiars has had this experience, and that's coming up?
No, it's someone in my next book.
In your next book, okay.
Well, I think it'll be my next one. My follow-up to Beyond the Seventh Gate. Someone had the experience on Toad Road.
Okay. How far done is that one?
How do you mean far down?
How far done?
Oh, done the book.
Yeah.
The writing's probably 70% done, but I haven't even begun the illustrations yet, so. It's maybe in all, not quite 50% done, but we'll see. It's the writing's going very quickly on it because I had a bunch of stuff written that I had planned for other books and that kind of fit in this one, so I'm shifting things around, and so the writing's going a lot faster than I thought.
All right, where can people find you, Tim?
StrangeFamiliars.com. Any contact information there goes to me. So if you want to listen to Strange Familiars, you can go there, or if you just want to contact me about my books or about anything, strangefamiliars.com.
All right. And Josh, your book, how's that going?
Good. I got back my line edit from Seriah. Now you know it. My line edit from Patrick today back. So I've got to. So we're well on track. This is where the rubber starts meeting the road. So
Now, what's a line edit?
so this is the second time that my publisher has read the book. The first time he said, "Hey, you might want to flesh this out, develop this idea a little bit more, etc." A line edit is where he goes through and says, "This sentence doesn't work. Take out this word. Replace this word." Like it's a much more detailed sort of focused thing. I still haven't looked at it yet because I'm a little bit nervous, but but I'm gonna get around to it tomorrow. So it's happening soon.
When do we get a sneak peek at the cover, dude?
As soon as Sam Sheeran finishes it. So it should be, I think that he should be, last I spoke to him, he said it should be done in the next couple weeks, next about 2 weeks or so. So I don't know, but that's also, not entirely up to me either. I've got to sort of defer to my publisher on that in terms of, when I can release the some images of the cover. So we'll see. I'm very excited to finally have it getting out the door, though. It's been way too long.
and how big is it going to be?
I believe the last count was 90,000 words.
Okay.
So to give people perspective, A Trojan Feast was 60, Brimstone Deceit was 80.
So it's your biggest book so far.
It's my biggest book so far. This is without me putting in the, literally probably about, at this point, because it also has the most in notes and references of any book I've done as well. I think it's about 700 different discrete references and over 1,500 in notes. So that'll probably tack on another 150 pages. But, the good news is Patrick's the kind of publisher who's like, no, we need to, be transparent, say where your stuff came from. It's okay to tag that on there. So it'll be a horse choker. But I would rather do it right and be as thorough as I can than to not. So
yes, yeah. And it's coming out on Anomalous Books, and the name of it's going to be what?
Anomalous Books, into the summer. It's so far so good. It should be titled Thieves in the Night. Basically, looking at paranormal child abduction from the fairy faith through the UFO era.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you both.
An absolute pleasure.
I think going over this stuff definitely helps us flesh out a little bit of patterns involving this light phenomenon, just how diverse and weird it gets.
Yeah, and how often it happens as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And a special thanks to our Patreons who are pledging $10 or more: William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Allison Cook, Christopher Vaughn, Robert Groom, Scott Morris Everett, Chris Elmquist, Supa Inframan, Russell Wilcoxon, Patricia Gayaquinta, John Eddy, Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, and Carla Mahoney. Thank you all so very much. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.